let's see, moving on to the consent agenda. Is there anyone have a comment about anything on the consent agenda?
Mr. Chairman,
Commissioner?
I'd like to make a motion to move item 8C to a position before position agenda.
You want to move it to the consent agenda?
Next on the docket.
Okay, you want to move it after. Okay, first let's deal with the consent agenda, and then when we get to item 8, I'll consider that. So on the consent agenda, any comments?
So moved.
Do we have a second?
Second.
And call the roll.
Commissioner Bluff?
Aye.
Commissioner Holden Rhodes?
Aye.
Commissioner Chapman?
Yes.
Vice Chair Eichel?
Yes.
And Chair Hyde.
Yes. So now on item 8, there was a comment from Commissioner Holden Rhodes. What was it that you wanted to do here?
C, yes. Yes, sir. If I understand you correctly, we take that up now?
Why don't you make a motion to do that, and if you get the support of the rest of the commission, we'll move on that.
I would make a motion to move 8C, which is a request for discussion and approve the Citizens Working Group for Aquifer Source, Water Protection, and Oil and Gas Ordinance.
Next. Do we have a second?
Second.
Madam Clerk.
Mr. Chairman, point of order.
Yes, I'm sorry.
We've already approved the agenda.
Yes.
It's kind of late to be changing it now. I mean, I don't want to be a stick in the mud, but we're going to follow process and procedure. We only have 2 agenda items in front of it at this point.
That's true. However, we do have a motion and a second. Let it proceed. Any other comment before we do that? Call the roll.
Commissioner Bluff?
Aye.
Commissioner Holden Rhodes?
Aye.
Commissioner Chapman?
No.
Commissioner Eichel?
Yes.
And Chair Hyde. Sorry.
Yes. So we're moving on to item 8C, request for a motion to discuss and approve the Citizens Working Group for the Aquifer Source Water Protection and Oil and Gas Ordinance.
Mr. Chair,
Commissioner?
I wish to make basically 3 motions. The first will be to agree to divide 8C into 2 parts. If that is approved, then I will make 2 separate motions instead of 1 motion back on the entire proposal as posted.
Okay, holding that motion first, do we have a second?
Second.
Any comment or question?
Mr. Chairman,
Commissioner?
I would like to hear the Vice Chair's reasoning for breaking it out, please, and what he intends to break out so the public can be aware of it.
First motion that I want to do is discuss and the approval of the Citizen Working Group on aquifer, water protection, and oil and gas ordinance has to be considered separately. Whether the citizen group should report directly to the commission or not.
Mr. Chairman, if I may ask the Vice, I thought at the last meeting we voted, with a majority, mind you, that we would have the Citizens Working Group report through the P&Z. We voted for that at the last meeting.
We did have that conversation, but the way I read the rules is the commission could choose to review this and make a different decision.
Noted.
So let's see, we're on the first motion.
On the first motion.
Any other comments or questions on the first motion?
Mr. Chair?
Commissioner?
The motion, or at least the item that is on the agenda for tonight, is request for motion to discuss and approve the Citizens Working Group for Aquifer Source Water Protection and Oil and Gas Ordinance. after reading it, I'm not quite sure I understand it, but that is the business that is before this commission. If Commissioner Eichwald would like to change it to something else, other than what I just read, I don't believe we are in a position to act on that tonight. That would have to be on the agenda. And not only that, but I would like to comment about Commissioner Block's point. We did vote in the last meeting that the citizens group, whatever it is they develop, will be taken to the P&Z Commission for their approval before it's brought to the county commission. And that was I don't know if it was unanimous or not, but it might have been. I'm just trying to keep things in a semblance of order here as to what the heck we're doing.
Okay,
Mr.
sure.
Chair.
Wait, just a minute. As I understand, the legal process here is that on this motion, you can make a motion to divide the discussion into two parts. In fact, at the last meeting, we divided it into 4 parts. So I guess I'd like an opinion from our attorney.
Chairman, as part of the way that I've read the attachment and from my understanding, part of the Citizens Working Group that's in that is who they would report to. Since that is all part of it, it is part of the same discussion and it could be broken into 2 parts as a part of that.
Okay, so we have a motion on the table to break it into 2 parts. Any other discussion? Madam Clerk,
Mr. Chairman, before we vote,
Commissioner, go ahead.
I'm not quite sure I heard what the second part was.
Well, first of all, we need to do this, and then we can, well, the 2 parts, I believe, is one to accept the general concept, et cetera, of the Citizens Working Group, and the second item is to whether it should go to P&Z or not. Is that correct? Commissioner Eichwald?
Well, what I would like in my motion is to divide a HC into 2 parts. And that's my motion at this point in time.
Okay. Any other discussion on dividing it into more than 1 part?
Mr. Chairman, I'm still unclear as to what the 2 parts are. It's difficult for me to vote on something that I don't know what it is. I'd just like a little clarity. I understand the concept of breaking it into 2 parts. What are those 2 parts?
Commissioner Eichwald?
Basically, what I would like to move is to divide HC and discuss and approve. Problem is that I would have my motions in my first motion and then on my second motion and explain each motion as I go along. It will not, what I want to do is divide that motion up into 2 and we can discuss what those 2 motions are when they come up.
So I guess first we got to decide on the breaking it into 2 motions. So if there's no other comments, call the roll. Madam Clerk?
Commissioner Block,
Aye.
Commissioner Rhodes,
Aye.
Commissioner Chapman,
I'm not sure what I'm voting on. I abstain.
Vice Chair Eichel,
Yes.
and Chair Hyden.
Yes. So with that said, Commissioner Eichwald, do you have a motion that you wanted to make about what the first part is?
Yes, my motion, I move to divide HC and request the motion to discuss and approve the Citizens Working Group for Aquifer Source Water Protection, Oil and Gas Ordinance as to consider separately whether the Citizens Working Group should report directly to the County Commission.
Okay, so this first, I just want clarity too. So what you want to know, your motion is, report directly to the Sandoval County Commission or not?
That's correct.
Okay. Do we have a second?
Second.
Discussion?
Mr. Chairman, I'd like to go first.
Yes.
I talked to a lot of people regarding the Citizens Working Group, and I'm reading through some emails now on them. Who am I to say no for citizens getting together and collaborating and working on an ordinance? We've always talked about the citizens participating in their local government, and I'm going to support that. If the citizens want to do this and they want 11 members or 15 members or 22 members or whatever they want, I'll support that and I'll let you do what you want, because that's your right under the Constitution of the United States to assemble and bring forward something to your government. However, what I will not support, vehemently I will oppose, is bringing this ordinance straight to the commission instead of going through the P&Z. The citizens have talked about they want equality. But if they're asking to do this ordinance and come to us straight to the commission, when the last one went through the P&Z process, that to me is treating this ordinance different from every other ordinance. It also sends a message. And the message is, if you don't like the process and it didn't go your way, you find another way. That is not how the county government is designed and set up for. We have a P&Z, which every commissioner here appoints one, or in Commissioner Ike Walt's case, or Commissioner Holdenrode's case, they appoint two. It's a quasi-judicial body. That's where this belongs. It doesn't belong coming straight to us. If, for instance, the Citizens Working Group, and they have some fine people on there, and I know some of them, and they're good people, and I know Mr. Phillips leading this organization. He's a very good man. Wrote one of my favorite books, by the way, Lincoln on Leadership. Can you imagine for a minute if the oil and gas industry wanted to do the same thing? Can you imagine that? How many here would support that? I wouldn't support it, because every ordinance needs to be treated the same. It's equal. That's what we pride ourselves on. That's what we're designed. That's how our country is designed, for equality. When we do this, it blows that out of the water. I will not support any ordinance coming straight to the county commission. And I'd be more happy to entertain any other thoughts on that. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Commissioner Block. I would like to, being the way we started this out, we haven't gotten comments from the public. And I'd like to just pause and take those. Gregory, Bergmark.
No, we got to push the button so you see a green light.
This button.
Yes.
There you go. And then name and address, please.
Yes, Greg Bergmark, I'm from Sandoval.
Mr. Chairman, Commissioners, Lou Fisher was unable to attend tonight, but he asked me to present his comments for your consideration. The following are his comments. Mr. Chairman, Commissioners, I would like to express my thanks, appreciation toward those of you who support the concept of the Citizens Working Group as an approach to addressing the matter of oil and gas ordinance for our county. The final outcome will be decided by you and will be the most important decision you will ever make as commissioners. There has been much rhetoric, distortion, and outright misstatement repeated so many times that the person repeating these falsehoods has probably come to the point of actually believing them himself at this point in time. The whopper which stands out most of all is the statement made many times by this individual that a county ordinance must completely conform to the relevant state statutes. Not true at all. But nice try, sir. There's also been commentary to the effect that discussion of this topic has not been a very democratic process. How so? What could be more democratic than 5 commissioners each having 1 vote apiece with 3 aligned votes prevailing? Mr. Chairman and Commissioners, please trust the people to bring forth an ordinance for your consideration, and they in turn will trust you to make the final decision which best serves the people of our great county. Thank you.
Thank you. Catherine, is it Brooke?
Thank you, Chairman and Commissioners. I too support the creation of a working group, and I support the inclusiveness of the membership in this group that has been proposed. And while the charge to produce an ordinance that includes aquifer source water and groundwater and surface water protection is essential, it needs to be expanded to provide for the safety and health of the residents of Sandoval County and the safety and health of the land as well. We need to put the protection of our residents before the needs of the oil and gas industry or any extractive industry. We need to include provisions to charge permittees fees to pay for ongoing inspections and monitoring of drilling operations. This cannot be done by the industry insiders. We need a third party to be involved in this process. Both federal and state governments have been lessening their regulations governing oil and gas drilling during this past year. Sandoval County needs to be the leader in protecting its citizens. We do not need to hear how the county is preempted by state and federal governments, which, by the way, the Commission conveniently has forgotten when it wants to. We need an ordinance that strictly regulates the industry, one that puts the interests of the citizens first. Thank you so much.
Thank you. George Franzen?
Commissioners, Chairman Lyle, thank you for the opportunity. I'm George Franzen, and President of the Eastern Sandoval Citizens Association. We have a position that I would like to present to you. The Eastern Sandoval Citizens Association Board of Directors has approved a position on the Sandoval Oil and Gas Ordinance preparation. The board unanimously supports a citizens working group of 9 local stakeholders to formulate an aquifer source water protection and oil and gas ordinance for Sandoval County. The Citizens Working Group should report directly to the County Commission. The oil and gas ordinance must prohibit any vertical or horizontal drilling and any other related activities to oil and gas in the geological formation known as the Albuquerque Basin, and is particularly located in Sandoval County. The Citizens Working Group should coordinate with other counties in New Mexico who either are developing their own oil and gas ordinance or currently have an ordinance in effect that deals with the Albuquerque Basin. The primary focus of the Citizens Working Group must be to protect the water supply of the Albuquerque Basin and Sandoval County. Gentlemen, thank you for your time.
Thank you. Let's see, Joe Munley?
The light is on, so I'm ready to go. My name is Joe Munley, 1113 Elman Avenue in Albuquerque. My wife and I have been coming to these meetings. We were just curious to see how you could frack in a populated area. I didn't know that much about fracking. I've learned quite a bit coming to the meetings. The discussion of the zoning board, I believe they adopted 2 of the citizens' recommendations, and I think those were dropped by the commissioners, so all of those meeting and all of that work had no effect on the final outcome. So I just wonder what the reason for going to the zoning other than a legal reason. How could they help? I'm here to support the working group. Some of the things that I've learned, I read that a few years ago New Mexico was 50th in the number of inspectors, and in fact the majority of wells weren't inspected, which means that Sandoval County would have to adopt an ordinance that included that if the citizens were to be protected. I also learned about the Pennsylvania health study where up to 3 kilometers the birth weight of the brain of the children was smaller, so I learned from that, and a report from some Nobel Prize physicians. I read that fracking causes cancer and asthma and other things, that the citizens would not be protected unless that is considered in an ordinance. So I'm just basically wanted to say that you know, the oil and gas, there's people who spoke from the industry who knew quite a bit, but the people who said they were spokesmen didn't contribute to the overall understanding or my education. So I hope that you can listen to the citizens group and protect the citizens of the county. So thank you for the opportunity of speaking.
Thank you. Mario Atencio.
Chair, Commissioners, thank you for your time. I'm coming to you as a representative of the Tri-Chapter Community Council. Communities of Torreon, councilors in Encino, they all lie within Sandoval County and account for a significant portion of voters. And so we're in a very unique situation because we are dual citizens of our nation and the United States and the county, and we vote in all those elections. And so within this, we have to make clear that the Navajo Nation should be, their comments are from a sovereign entity, and the Pueblo is the same. Their comments should be weighted to the PNZ on a consultation basis that mirrors the federal government Section 106 consultation, based upon free and prior informed consent, as outlined in the United Nations Declaration of the Rights of Indigenous Peoples. So then we have that other rights, world rights. And so that's my comment on that. But on the Sandoval County side, we citizens, lifelong members of Sandoval County, I guess we should hold that right to, because when you look at this, there is huge aquifers that I was just looking at the map, the checkerboard is absolutely crazy. The administrative actions done by a PNZ from Sandoval County have direct impact in those places. Specifically in Encino, New Mexico. That is, those aquifers are a incredible sustainable resource that we need to protect. There are state land, private lands all within that area. And so and they're all interconnected. And so the word Encino actually means springs. And so within that, and just not to focus just on water, air quality, cultural resources, strongly suggest that the proposed citizen group look to the consultation process the Bureau of Land Management is doing with local tribes, as the tribe chapter is Tri-Chapter Council is a cooperating agency with the BLM in regards to the resource management plan. And thank you for your time, Commissioners.
Thank you. Sally Hall.
She's already spoken.
Yeah, she signed it twice. Okay, I'm sorry. So the last comment from Commissioner Block was that he was opposed to this not going through P&Z. Any other comments from the Commission?
No, hold on one second. I think you
have more to say.
Well, I think I heard that wrong. I want to make sure it was clear. Mr. Chairman, I am opposed to the Citizens Working Group presenting the ordinance straight to the County Commission.
Other comments from the Commission?
Mr. Chairman,
Commissioner?
thank you. Just a couple of ideas that were sent to me from constituents that I think are worth sharing and that are relevant to the discussion of the citizens group. And then a couple of other items of interest that I would like to present. I too will not support a citizens group bringing an ordinance to the commission. It's the whole reason why we have a planning and zoning commission. They are citizen volunteers, if you will, who do this work on behalf of their fellow taxpayers. And at this point in time, knowing where we're at in this process, I really kind of find it quite demeaning to the P&Z board after all of the effort that they made to put forth an ordinance. And here we are talking about forming a citizens group when that's essentially what they are. I find that kind of troubling. Maybe not everybody agrees with me, but that's the whole purpose of a planning and zoning commission. We have a director who is capable and able to lead them in the process. We also have legal advice for that group as they craft an ordinance to bring it forth to the commission. That process played out over a 2-year period. And I'll say what I said the night that the ordinance was not formally approved, which by the way was nothing more than a formality since the board had already approved to legally post the ordinance that was in question. However, it's just kind of wrong in my mind that we would even be sitting here talking about circumventing that process. I won't support it. I think it's much like Commissioner Block mentioned, you're now toying with the process the way the county has done things for years, and it just doesn't make any sense to me. An idea, though, that was sent to me from a constituent that I want to share with you, and I think it makes really good sense. If you wanted a fresh approach and perspective to this entire issue, then why would you populate the citizens group with folks who were involved in the process over the last 2 years? For instance, the P&Z chairman who resigned from his post, who's been a P&Z chairman here in Sandoval County for 20 years. What are you expecting to get different? Same with Mary Feldblum. She's been here since day one and been involved in the process since day one. Why are you expecting that you're going to get something different from this process if you don't have some fresh faces? And another real concern, I think, is how can you expect the P&Z Commission to be impartial when you're populating this group with a couple of P&Z commissioners? I mean, how can they act in that role in the citizens group effectively as citizens and then turn around and be on the P&Z Commission to consider whatever that group brings forward? I think that challenges the concept of being democratic about the process and being impartial in the process. And then the other thing that I mentioned in the last meeting that I think is very apropos is to have someone on the citizens group who knows a little bit about formulating an ordinance and knows a little bit about preemption. I appreciate Mrs. Brooks' comments, but the reality is, as commissioners, we try to mitigate the potential for litigation. And therefore, this commission, I would hope, would not put forward any ordinance that would again expose us to another lawsuit. So, those are just some ideas that I wanted to share that came from some constituents. I think they're food for thought. I would also like to point out that there's been a very public process ongoing on the online version of the local paper. And it asked the question of the public, would you support the concept of a citizens group effectively putting together an oil and gas ordinance? And I'm going to share with you what the results of that survey are. 419 people voted against that idea, and 34 people voted for it. That's like a 12-to-1 ratio of people that are against a citizens group trying to formulate an oil and gas ordinance. I'm sorry, those are not my numbers. That's the public speaking. It's a very public process, so I think it's worth sharing that while you have some folks in the room here that think that it's the best way to go, I will agree with the concept of government participating in your government and so on and so forth. That's the process that's been playing out here for the last couple of years, trying to get an oil and gas ordinance done. That's exactly the process that's played out. So just things to ponder as you move forward with this. Just wanted to lay that out there. Interestingly enough, I noticed on the list of people that are on the citizens group this time, it's changed from the last meeting just 2 weeks ago. Removed from the list is Miss Alicia Ortega, who said she would be here and be part of the citizens group. I don't know if she's in the room tonight, but she said she would be here representing the All Pueblo Council of Governors. I challenged that night the aspect of, if she is here representing the All Council Pueblo of Governors, then I would like to see something in writing that gives her that authority to do so. You're talking about more than one Pueblo, you're talking about more than one group of leaders, and so given our experience with Pueblo leadership in regards to the oil and gas ordinance, I would just put forth that we would need something in writing from whoever shows up and says that they represent them. And I noticed that there was a gentleman added to the citizens group, a local attorney. He's also a New Mexico State Representative, Derek Linty. He was not on the list last time, and he is this time. The thing I find troubling about that addition to the list is that when myself and Commissioner Eichwald and Director Springfield and County Attorney Heather Smallwood were invited to a group of Pueblo leaders to meet with them and discuss the oil and gas ordinance, the very first thing that Derek Linty told us in the meeting was this was not government-to-government consultation, which just basically told me, we were wasting our time, according to him. I think we had some good discussion with some of the Pueblo leaders that day, but I'm not quite sure we gained any ground in our efforts to try and put forth an oil and gas ordinance to their satisfaction. I think one of the concepts is if you want to do something that represents a clean break and try and develop something different, interject some different ideas into the process here, and come up with something of value from the citizens group, I think you got to find some different people to populate this group. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Any other comments?
Mr. Chairman, one of the things I asked this group was, and I talked about it 2 weeks ago, I still don't have it. I am looking for a charter from this group, what the roles, I talked about the roles and responsibilities of the group. I talked about terms of reference. I have not seen that. And I'm looking at the Citizens Working Group here, and what I see in here on page 2, under participation, is maximum citizen participation. And once again, I have to go back to maximum government participation. The government with the P&Z and the Sandoval County Commission is designed to hear from as many citizens as possible on whatever ordinance is brought forward. Again, this goes back to treating every ordinance equally. I don't know how many times the citizens have talked about we want to be heard, we want to be treated equally. But yet now, that's not the process. It's circumventing our process here, and it's not right, Mr. Chairman. And this is a mistake. And it's sending the wrong message, and it's setting a bad precedence in local government. You don't like how these guys vote? Go around, go this way. You'll get what you want that way. That's wrong. And it doesn't matter if you don't like some of the people in the county government, or agree with people on the P&Z Commission, or disagree with people on the county commission. We have a process. You follow that process. And you work at the grassroots campaign, and you work it through. Now again, if Mr. Don Phillips, who I respect, wants to put together a citizens working group, more power to him. He can put whoever he wants on that working group. Any citizen or any group can put together a working group. But you can't circumvent the process. And if any commissioner supports that, what else will you support?
Mr. Chairman?
Yes.
Sir, I would like to make a motion to move the previous question.
Okay.
Well, Mr. Chairman, I also haven't received an answer. I asked, and maybe Commissioner Holden Rhodes has it, or someone here has it, but I want to see the organization of this working group to see how it's going to work. Is it a majority vote? Is it a supermajority vote? When are the meetings? Where are they going to be? Tell me the roles and responsibilities of these members. Give me a charter. Give me something. I need more. I mean, I'm going to support the group, but I'd just like to know if you're going to bring this forward, and it actually, for whatever reason, the commission votes to bypass the P&Z, and it comes straight to the county commission, I would like to know the organization of this group. I think that's a fair question. I think that's more than reasonable.
I haven't had an opportunity to speak yet, and we don't have a second to the motion to call the question, so. In general, I'm okay with the, excuse me. I'm okay with the concept of the Citizens Working Group. I think at the end of this document, it talks about what the operating guidelines were or are being suggested, which kind of, in summary, identifies how that group might work. I know that's probably not the charter that Commissioner Block would like to see, but I think that was the attempt to provide that information. I'm really on the fence, I'll tell you, with regard to the issue of planning and zoning or not planning and zoning. I think there's some legitimate comments with regard to the county's process, although I've also looked at other organizations that chose not to deal with this as an item that was just a land use item. And they've used different approaches. So I gotta be honest with you, I'm really struggling with this. The other thing I'm struggling with is that oil and gas is a very important industry in our state. And in the previous ordinance that we had on the table, my big objection to that ordinance was the fact that it did not bifurcate the county, and I felt that there were some very delicate parts of the county that run through the Rio Grande Rift that runs right through the middle of the Rio Grande Aquifer. And that was my big issue as to why I wouldn't have voted for that. I think the oil and gas industry is important to the county of Sandoval as it is to the state. In fact, I think I read an article here just a few weeks ago from my friend Dave Eli, who he and I don't agree on many things, but we are friends. 38% of the budget this year from the state is dependent on oil and gas. We can't ignore that fact. And I'm concerned that if we don't take every precaution as we're going through this process to be sure that we protect the water on one hand, but on the other hand, we also are not create an ordinance that's such an impediment to an industry that at least now and probably for the next 3 decades we are dependent on. So I'm how I might vote on whether P&Z or not P&Z, I've got to tell you, I'm really struggling with it. I think there's one aspect of P&Z allows further scrutiny of what we're doing. On the other hand, like I say, there's been government entities that have chosen not to take it through the P&Z function. So if any of my fellow commissioners can help me with my struggle, I would certainly appreciate it.
Mr. Chairman, I would like to bring up a point that might maybe help you sway to my side. First of all, there was a citizens working group. It was formed by Dr. Alan Friedman, who put together a citizens working group. And guess what, Mr. Chairman? That went through the P&Z. Then there was an ordinance called the Stoddard Ordinance. And wow, you know what, Mr. Chairman? That went through the P&Z. Then there was something called the Heil Ordinance. And if I remember right, that also went through the P&Z with some amendments here. So now those 3 ordinances are going to be treated differently. And again, it's all about equality in the process. So now those 3 ordinances, they can go through the process of the P&Z. But this one, no. No, we don't want it. We want to bring it straight to you. And when the citizens came here, they asked us to listen to them, and they wanted to be listened to, and they wanted to be treated equally. But yet this ordinance is being treated special. And what kind of message does that send, Mr. Chairman? Those 3 ordinances went through the process, but this one? No. I don't understand it.
Mr. Chairman, I think I'd like to add to that. Excuse me, we go first. Okay, thank you. I think I can help you with your struggles. 2 things. One, last meeting, this commission voted. Look at the record. I'm pretty sure it's there that we voted that anything that the citizens group came forward with was going to go through the Planning and Zoning Commission, period. The other thing is, obviously, you, Mr. Chairman, believe in the Planning and Zoning Board process. Otherwise, you would not be the chairman of the Planning and Zoning Board for the city of Rio Rancho. So, I mean, I find it difficult to believe you're struggling with this, but I'm going to help you with it. I'm going to put forth a motion right now that this commission vote right now, once and for all, on the concept of whatever the citizens group produces will go through the same process that goes through every single time this county produces a land use ordinance, or any ordinance for that matter that involves the county. It's going to go through the process they all go through. So I'm going to put forth a motion right now that whatever the citizens group produces will go through the Planning and Zoning Commission before it comes to the commission.
Do I hear a second?
Second.
Mr. Chair, before you,
My next comment is any comments or questions from the commission?
okay. Can we act on my motion first?
Let's see.
I mean, I made my motion before. This motion was presented, and there was a second on it, so can we vote on my motion?
Just to recap, was your motion, Vice Chair, to break out the P&Z option off the citizens group?
I think either way, the result, we can vote on it. One is in the negative, one is in the positive. So the motion on the table is to break it out from going through P&Z, is that correct?
That's correct.
And so you're calling the question on that, and it had a second from Commissioner Holden Rhodes. So if there's no other comment, I'll call.
Mr. Chairman?
Yes.
Is that, I just want to be clear, because I want to make sure what I'm voting on. That is not to send it straight to the county commission, correct?
Let's be clear. If you vote in favor of that motion, you're voting to not send it to P&Z. If you vote in opposition to that, you're voting that it go through P&Z. That's a little confusing, but.
So you vote no to go through P&Z, just so we're all clear. That's what you're saying, Mr. Chairman?
If you vote no, it would be going through P&Z. If you vote yes, it would not be going through P&Z. Is that what I understand the notion? Okay. So, if there are no other further comment, I would ask the Madam Clerk to call the roll.
Commissioner Block?
No.
Commissioner Holden Rhodes?
Yes.
Commissioner Chapman?
Absolutely not.
Vice Chair Eichel?
Yes.
Chair Hyla?
I'm going to vote no on that. So, does that move you to your third motion, Commissioner Eichwald? Because that seems to be
He needs a second.
kind of in opposition to that.
Well, based on the not going to the commission, directly to the commission, I don't need to make any other motion.
Well, I think there's one more motion. Well, we do have you made your first motion to discuss a breakout.
That's correct.
So there has not yet been a motion made on the item that is on the agenda.
To support the working group.
I'm sorry?
To support the working group, correct?
Request for a motion to discuss and approve the citizens working group for aquifer source water protection and oil and gas ordinance is the item that is on the agenda. There has not been a motion with regard to that item.
So moved.
Do we have a so moved? Do we have a second?
Can I hear the motion again, Mr. Chairman?
Yes, it's a request for a motion to discuss, which we've been doing, and approve the citizens working group for aquifer source, water protection, oil and gas ordinance. But somebody needs to make a motion. I merely stated that that wasn't a motion made, that was merely a statement of what the item is on the agenda.
Well, I'll move that we approve, request a motion to discuss and approve the citizens working group for the aquifer source, water protection, oil and gas ordinance, excluding the underlying language, the end product that reads directly to the Sandoval County Commission in two places.
Second.
Any further discussion on that item? Madam Clerk, call the roll.
Commissioner Block?
Aye.
Commissioner Holden Rhodes?
Aye.
Commissioner Chapman?
No.
Vice Chair Eichel?
Yes.
And
Yes.
Chair Hyla? Sorry.
Mr. Chairman?
I have another motion.
Commissioner Eichwald.
I move to approve the directly to Sandoval County Commission language in both places so that the end product shall read as follows. Present a joint recommendation for action directly to the Sandoval County Commission. Also, to produce a comprehensive oil and gas ordinance directly to Sandoval County Commission that includes aquifer, source water, groundwater, and surface water protection.
Do we have a second?
I will second that, Mr. Chair.
Mr. Chairman?
Didn't we just
I-
make that?
Yeah, so when you do that, you could kind of bring the question back to the table that we already discussed. So,
I think that's Mr. Vice Chair, I think your motion's a moot point, because I thought we just voted to pass, to approve the Citizens Working Group, and then to pass.
no, we made a motion to discuss and approve, and now we need, if we're going to approve the Citizens Working Group, we need to make a motion to approve the Citizens Working Group to produce a comprehensive oil and gas ordinance. But it will go through the county commission, or the planning and zoning board. There's got to be a better way to say that.
So what you're doing now, so I want to make sure I understand and vote correctly here, is we voted 4-1 in favor of the Citizens Working Group, and 3-2 that the Citizens Working Group
No,
will go
what
for.
we actually voted on was to discuss and approve. Now we need to
Okay,
vote
gotcha.
to approve the Citizens Working Group for Aquifer Source Water Protection and Oil and Gas Ordinance. And we need a motion to that effect.
Are you talking about the
I
members,
move-
of that group?
Yeah.
The members of that group? The
Correct.
citizens?
The only thing we wouldn't be agreeing on is that it goes to, directly to the commission. We would be agreeing that it would go to P and Z.
Do I need to read my motion again?
Yeah.
I move to approve the directly to the Sandoval County Commission language in both places, so that the end product will read as follows: present a joint recommendation for action directly to the Sandoval County Commission. Second, produce a comprehensive oil and gas ordinance directly to the Sandoval County Commission that includes aquifer, source water, groundwater, and surface water protection.
Commissioner, you have made the motion. Do we have a second?
Second.
Without further discussion, if we call the roll on this, and because people don't agree on it going directly to the commission, your citizen working group could be voted down. Is that what you're asking?
That's correct.
Is there any other comment?
Excuse me. Do we have discussion on this?
Yes?
If this is defeated, then there's no citizen working group.
Correct.
But as it reads now, we would be going to the citizen working group, going directly back to P and Z.
Based on the
First
motion, yes, that it would go through P and Z.
Mr. Chairman, I want to be just crystal clear for everybody.
Right.
So this next vote is going to be for the working group to go through the P and Z Commission. Is that correct?
Well, what the motion that Commissioner Eichwald has made is that it would be for the citizens working group, but that it would go report directly to the county commission.
Okay, did we just vote that down?
Yes, that's my concern.
Okay, so
Why are we entertaining?
why are we doing this?
Well, the motion that we should be entertaining, having already dealt with whether it goes to P and Z or not, is to approve the citizens working group for the aquifer source water protection and oil and gas ordinance.
So moved on that.
What?
I agree, so can we do that? Like
Somebody needs to make a motion to that.
So moved.
Do we have a second? So that dies without a second. So,
Mr. Chairman.
Back to you, Commissioner Eichwald. If you want that motion to stand, and I know you have a second, we'll proceed on the vote.
Mr. Chairman?
Commissioner?
We'll stick with number two. motion that we did, and I'll withdraw my motion on number 3.
Request for motion to discuss. Yes, you stuck with second motion 2. Is that what you're making?
That's correct. I'm withdrawing my motion on my motion now.
So are you making a motion on this?
I'll motion to withdraw my third motion.
Okay, so we're back to your second motion.
It's already been approved.
Well, the only thing that we ended up discussing was the fact that it was going to P&Z or not.
Well, we can keep the third motion and take out directly to Sandoval County Commission on third motion.
Is that your motion?
Yes.
Do we have a second?
Can I hear the motion stated?
I move to approve the language to both places be read as follows. Produce a comprehensive oil and gas ordinance directly to Sandoval County Commission that includes aquifer, source water, groundwater, and surface water protection, and eliminate the present to present to the joint recommendation directly to the Sandoval County Commission. Remove that portion.
So if you were making a motion to approve the Citizens Working Group Aquifer Source Water Protection Oil and Gas Ordinance, wouldn't that cover that? Being that we've already decided on whether it goes to P&Z or not?
Yes.
So is that your motion?
Mm-hmm.
Do we have
I'll
a
second that motion.
Can I
Do we
hear
have a
the motion?
second?
For clarity, can I hear the motion, please?
The motion, let me state it, Commissioner Eichwald, and tell me if I'm wrong. This is a motion to approve the Citizen Working Group for Aquifer Source Water Protection and Oil and Gas Ordinance. And we've already decided that it's going to P&Z.
That's correct.
And we have a second.
And in that motion, are you approving the current list of people that are
Yes.
in the, without any discussion?
Yes.
Mr. Chairman, I would remind you that at the last meeting, when I brought this up about the fact that there is nobody in this citizens group with representation of my area, and then I brought up some other issues with this group, you said to me, I want you to bring 3 recommendations to the meeting, the next meeting. That's this meeting today. I have not spoken on this yet, but I intend to. And I'd like to do it now before you vote on this group.
We've got the motion on the floor and the second, and it's time for comments.
Okay. One of the comments that I made in the last meeting was the fact that I think it would be beneficial to this group if they had somebody in their midst who knew something about the legality and the appropriateness, the jurisdictional questions, the purview of the county, et cetera, in crafting an ordinance. If I look at this group of people here, with the exception of John Arango, who is the former chairman of the Planning and Zoning Commission, I'm not quite sure anybody in that group really has a handle on that. And I think that's very, very important. Otherwise, I think you're running the risk, sir, of an ordinance coming before the Planning and Zoning Commission that's just not going to fly because it may be preempted, it may be outside of the purview of the county, it may put forth an agenda that the county currently can't even afford to pursue. You've heard a lot of discussion about inspection, you've heard discussion about monitoring, you've heard discussions about wells being drilled and so on and so forth and monitored and so on and so forth. These are things that this county is not in a position to do. And I doubt seriously if there's any county in the state of New Mexico that does some of that, simply because they don't have the financial wherewithal to do it. So I would caution to move forward with a citizens group lacking somebody in that area of expertise. Tonight, I would like to recommend that Makita Hill, who is the Assistant Director of Planning and Zoning, not a voting member of the Planning and Zoning Board, be part of this group. He can direct this group, he can guide this group so that they don't get out of bounds with this ordinance. And there's a real good reason why for all of you that are smiling at me out there. And the reason is this commission, I will not vote on an ordinance that I know is going to cause litigation for you, the taxpayers. So that's a really good reason to avoid going down this road without somebody being in the citizens in the midst of that group with some expertise on all those items that I just mentioned. This is a county employee. Are you signaling me?
No.
Oh, I thought you were trying to signal me some way. Okay, thank you. Yeah, I mean, I think it'd be appropriate. So Makita Hill would be my recommendation to be part of the group. I think it's democratic to have him in there. He's not a voting member of the P&Z Commission. He can give guidance to this group. Short of that, I think you're going to have an ordinance that won't get off the ground, Mr. Chairman. I'm going to forego my other recommendation because I realize in the process here that you guys have described for the citizens group, there is an opportunity for somebody to submit what I would call technical papers on the very subject of the Albuquerque Basin. And there is a very learned person that I know who is an expert on the subject. Worked here in this community for many, many years. Knows the geology, knows the hydrology, knows the aquifers, knows where the hydrocarbons are as well. And so he has already submitted to me a white paper that I think would be appropriate for this group to digest. It's a little technical, but maybe with the expertise that Mr. Phillips claims he has, he can explain it to the group exactly what's being said in the paper. So I do have that white paper that I will be submitting to the group as appropriate technical knowledge base on the Albuquerque Basin. We did have this gentleman here one day. I will just tell you that he has over 50 peer-reviewed publications on the subject, so he's a very learned man and knows exactly what he's talking about, regardless of the fact of whether he lives here or not. So I'm going to submit a paper on his behalf. I asked one other person to be a part of the citizens group from my area, and they declined. So I'm left with my one recommendation of Makita Hill, and I think he'd be a good addition to the citizens group to help guide them along the way.
So is your motion to add Makita Hill as a non-voting member?
Yes.
Do we have a second on that?
Mr. Chair, is it appropriate to ask you to move the previous question at this time? Yeah.
Well,
Mr. Chair, can I make a comment on one of the members of this group? If I'm not mistaken, and I could be mistaken, but I'm pretty sure, we have Derek Lenti, who is a part of it, that is named in this group. He's an attorney, and if I'm not mistaken, he is familiar with water law. That would be a person who could probably keep this group out of trouble as far as the issue of legal problems. Also, the other gentleman that's on this group is also Myron Armijo, who also was with the New Mexico Office of State Engineer and Interstate Stream Commission. So those two people are very familiar with water law.
Commissioner Rhodes asked to move the question, but there wasn't a second. And I'm going to second Commissioner Chapman's Makita Hill, and we can vote on it, and then we can move back to the questions. So any other comment about Makita Hill as a non-voting member of this?
Mr. Chairman,
Commissioner?
So I'm struggling with this one because it is a citizens working group, and if the leadership of that group wants to add or delete any member of that board, I think that's their call. Or if another group, whoever they might be, want to put together their own citizens group, let them do so. I think that we should just, my opinion is, I like Mr. Hill, I respect Mr. Hill, I respect his expertise in this area, but I want to keep, again, to me, it goes back to the process. Let the integrity of the group go forward, and if another citizens group wants to come forward, let them pick their own group. I have a hard time just telling people who they can and can't have on a particular citizens working group when they're going to go through the P&Z process now. That would be up to them. Mr. Nikita Hill is a friend of mine, but I can't support that. I think we need to be hands off and let this group go do what they need to do. And if another group wants to come and they want Mr. Hill or anybody else, let them do so. But I will not support any additions or subtractions from this group. Let the leadership figure it out on their own. Thank you.
Any other comments on this item?
Mr. Chairman, I would like to ask a question in regards to the list, the citizens group.
Yes.
And I would like for you, Mr. Chairman, to explain to me and everybody in the room how this list was generated, how was it done. I know I wasn't part of the process. I would think anything that this commission wants to put forth, that would be a process that the commission would be involved in. Otherwise, what am I here for? The citizens can run Sandoval County, then don't need me. I'm just trying to keep, hands-on with the process. I'm all about government by the people, believe me. Citizens elected me, and I respect them, and I'm going to respect the process, and that's why I've been protective of the planning and zoning process here at the county and the way we do things. There's a reason why we do them that way.
Okay, we're still looking at Nikita Hill, but your comment, you asked a question. The best I can answer you is this was developed to provide representation from various areas of the Sandoval County community and to provide people with some expertise that might be related to the objective and dealing with water, legal, etc. And it's sort of evolved, as you pointed out yourself. There were a couple changes, and that's how we got here. So it's the best
I want to know specifically, Mr. Chairman, how did these changes take place? For instance, how did State Representative Derek Lenti get on the list, and why was Ms. Ortega removed, and who decided that that was the appropriate move to make?
Well, I think it goes back to a question that you had before about her being on the list as possibly representing all Pueblos. So I'm guessing that in discussion she wasn't the right person to fill that slot. Not that Lenti does support all Pueblos, but this is sort of what you would call a straw man or a draft of a selection of people. And that you would look at that draft and you would say, yeah, I like the draft, or I don't, or let's beat it up and let's tweak it here, tweak it there, or whatever.
So, and I'm okay with that. My question is, what was the process? I want to know how these people got on the list. Did they approach? I mean, for instance, there's a P&Z commissioner, representative of Commissioner Eichwald's area. There is a couple of alternates that are representative of Commissioner Holden Rhodes' area and Commissioner Block's area. There was, as I remember, a ton of discussion about the fact that we want to be inclusive of the Pueblos. And I just want this thing to bear fruit. you know, if you're gonna be inclusive, then be inclusive. I don't see anybody in here from the Pueblos, and anybody who says they represent them. So, help me out here. I'm trying to understand, how did you get a list like this? Who compiled the list? Was it Mr. Phillips? Was it the commissioners? You know, who did it? I know I wasn't a part of it. Nobody reached out to me and said, hey, we're putting together a list, a citizens group list here. Nobody talked to me about it. I found out about it at the last meeting. And because of that, you suggested, well, come to the next meeting with a couple of your own suggestions. And I waited until tonight to do that. I know you're going to give me an opportunity to get Mr. Hill onto the citizens group, but nobody has explained to me what the process was for generating this group. Who led the process?
I don't know that. I think probably Mr. Phillips had some influence, some discussion with other people who stepped up and said, hey, I'd be interested in participating. Beyond that, I can't say that it was a...
And I would ask, whose district does Mr. Phillips live in?
I'm so sorry, that again?
Whose county commission district does Mr. Phillips live in?
I believe he is...
Can we ask Mr. Phillips? I see him sitting right here in the front row. Who's your county commissioner?
Well, he intends to live in Placitas, I understand. I don't know.
Are you telling me Mr. Phillips doesn't even live in Sandoval County?
Well, you know how the state law is with regard to elections. If you want to intend to live someplace, you get to run for that office. So I think that was the...
I don't understand what that has to do with a citizens group, citizens of Sandoval County.
Well,
that's where I'm going.
Yeah, well...
Mr. Chairman, I would ask of you again, is it not appropriate to move the previous question?
Only if someone seconds it.
Can we have it read back to us, please, so we can move on?
There's a motion or two ahead of that one, but I mean, I want my questions answered. I think my citizen taxpayers that live in my district deserve to know, you know, who's making up this citizens group? Do they even live in Sandoval County? I haven't gotten an acknowledgement from Mr. Phillips as to who his county commissioner is. Nobody seems to want to answer that question. Don't we think it would be appropriate to have citizens of Sandoval County in this citizens group?
Well, yeah, Commissioner Chapman, I guess we can continue to beat this issue to death all night. I don't know where it's going. There's a list of names here that are on the table.
I'm asking a very straightforward question here.
And I've tried to answer it the best I can. So.
Well, why don't we get an answer from the man? He's sitting right here in front of the room.
He's wanting the oil expert out of New Mexico.
Are you answering for Mr. Phillips?
No, I'm just saying that you said that.
Excuse me. Wait. This isn't how we have discussions here. We're not debating with the audience, Commissioner. This is a discussion amongst commissioners. So.
I'm shocked. I'm just shocked. Sorry.
I'll just add a little bit to the discussion. When I met Mr. Phillips, he told me he lived in Santa Fe. And until he tells me different, I'm going to believe that's where he lives. I don't think it's appropriate for this citizens group to be led by somebody who doesn't even live in this county. I'm sorry. Whoever leads this group ought to be representative of the people who live here. You want to make it a democratic process? You want to make it government by the people? To me, that would be appropriate. You want to call in experts from all over the state to debate a question here in Sandoval County? That's inappropriate. Unless you want to open it up for everybody. That could come from anywhere.
Mr. Chairman? Mr. Chairman?
Wait. Commissioner Chapman, are you done talking?
Yes, sir.
Commissioner Block?
You know, I appreciate Commissioner Chapman's points, but I will point out that we have a New Mexico Tech study, and if my memory serves correctly, New Mexico Tech is outside of Sandoval County. So I am comfortable with, number one, very comfortable with New Mexico Tech, who I trust implicitly. Number two, going back to the Citizens Working Group, they can have whoever they want on there. I don't really care where Mr. Phillips lives. We've had Nemoga people in here, we've had other oil and gas industry people in here advocating for their own case as well. So it doesn't matter to me. As long as the citizens group goes through the process, which they will, it doesn't matter to me. And again, any other citizens group wants to come in here, and some live in Houston, Texas, Miami, Florida, Manchester, New Hampshire, whatever it is, fine. But again, we paid New Mexico Tech outside of Sandoval County to do a study, and no one had any heartburn with where that university was located outside of Sandoval County. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Chairman, I'd just like to add to the discussion, if you're going to contract with someone who is technical, not every county in the state of New Mexico has a technical college located in it. The reason why Director Springfield made the contract with New Mexico Tech is because they are recognized as the technical school here in the state of New Mexico. The fact that they're located down in Sierra County, is it? Socorro County? Yeah, I mean, it's because that's where they're located. If we had one here in Sandoval County, we could have contracted with them maybe. That's the reason why. But I just find fault with the process when you're going to say, hey, this is a citizens committee and it's Sandoval citizens, and then you find out that not everybody's from Sandoval County.
Commissioner Chapman, we've heard your position on that. Are there any other comments on this?
I have one other.
Wait. We have a motion on the table with regard to McKee Hill. And I'd like to get it on or off, so then we can move on to the rest of the discussion.
Would you like for me to make the motion again?
No?
Okay.
You made it, I seconded it. So, Madam Clerk?
Commissioner Black?
No.
Commissioner Holden Rhodes?
No.
Commissioner Chapman?
Yes.
Vice Chair Eichel?
No.
Chair Hyde?
Yes. So that fails. So now, we're going back to what we were talking about, the motion was whether we're approving the Citizens Working Group or not. And that's a motion that is on the table. So, is there any other discussion on that?
Sir, could you read the motion again, please?
Yeah, it's real simple. It's a motion to approve the Citizen Working Group for Aquifer Source Water Protection and Oil and Gas Ordinance. Understand that we've already voted that it will go back to the P&Z. Needs a second.
Second.
Well, wait a minute. First, it needs a first. I just explained what it was. That was your motion.
Okay.
So do we have a second?
Yes.
Okay. Well, I make the sausages tough.
Can we get the roll going?
If there's no other discussion, we'll call in the question. Madam Clerk.
Commissioner Black?
Aye.
Commissioner Holden Rhodes?
Aye.
Commissioner Chapman?
No.
Vice Chair Eichel?
Yes.
Chair Hyde?
Yes.
Commissioner, Chairman Hyde, I'd like to explain my vote. I'm not necessarily voting against the concept of a citizens committee. I'm voting against the fact that we have people on this committee who don't live in our community. And enough said. Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman.
Sure. You need to take a break now, or not? Keep charging on? Charging on. Well, I didn't know about the people's fingers in the back room.
Good for another hour.
Yeah, good. I don't know whether I am. 8A, request for a motion to approve publication of title and general summary of the proposed ethics ordinance.